What if the world was not merely flawed, but built upon a lie at its very foundation? The secret book of John does not describe creation as incomplete, nor humanity as fallen through moral failure. It describes something far more unsettling, a structure established under false authority, a cosmos ordered by a ruler who mistook power for origin. This is not a story about misunderstanding. It is a story about deception embedded into reality itself. The text draws a line that later belief systems could not allow to remain visible. It separates the true source from the creator who governs the world. It exposes a voice that claims supremacy without knowing what precedes it. That claim shaped everything that followed: law, fear, obedience. Once authority is misidentified as ultimate, control becomes sacred. Questioning becomes dangerous. Alternative cosmologies must be erased, not debated. The lie cannot survive comparison, so the veil descends, not to protect mystery, but to preserve obedience. This episode is not about symbols or allegory. It is about how a false claim became the foundation of the world, and why recognizing that claim still unsettles everything built upon it. The lie does not begin as deception. It begins as misidentification. The secret book of John does not accuse the creator of plotting a falsehood. It describes something more dangerous: a ruler who mistakes himself for the source, a voice that speaks from power and assumes that power is origin. This mistake becomes foundational. In the Gnostic account, the creator governs the world effectively. He shapes matter, establishes order, enforces law. From inside the system, nothing appears missing. Authority functions, structure holds, control succeeds. That success conceals the error. A ruler who sees only what he governs concludes that nothing exists beyond it. Surrounded by his own creation, he mistakes enclosure for totality. His declaration, "I am God and there is no other," is not a lie spoken knowingly. It is a conclusion drawn from limitation. This is what makes the situation irreversible. A conscious deceiver could be confronted. An ignorant authority cannot. The creator's claim to ultimacy is not challenged because nothing inside the system provides a reference beyond him. Comparison is impossible, and without comparison, power becomes indistinguishable from source. The secret book of John insists on this point. The lie embedded in creation is not false information. It is false framing. Authority is presented as origin. Rule is mistaken for source. Obedience is confused with alignment. Once this framing takes hold, everything reorganizes around it. Law becomes sacred. Fear becomes reverence. Submission becomes virtue. The system does not require constant enforcement because belief does the work. This is why the lie persists. It is not imposed violently, it is inherited. Children are born into a world where authority already claims ultimacy. Language already assumes it. Structure already reinforces it. By the time awareness develops, the framing feels natural. The secret book of John exposes this inheritance. It claims that the deepest distortion is not moral failure, but conceptual collapse. When source and ruler are confused, the entire cosmos orients itself incorrectly. Everything points upward to power rather than inward to origin. This misidentification explains why fear governs religious life, why law precedes understanding, why obedience is rewarded more than recognition. The system must protect the framing that sustains it. Alternative explanations become threats. The lie embedded in creation is therefore not a sentence spoken once. It is a structure, repeated endlessly. Every ritual that reinforces fear, every law that replaces understanding, every command that discourages inquiry. Each repetition deepens the framing. The secret book of John does not offer correction yet. It offers exposure. It names the moment when authority was mistaken for source, and shows how that single error organized the world that followed. This is not a story about evil intent. It is a diagnosis of how ignorance, once armed with power, becomes indistinguishable from truth. And once indistinguishable, it no longer needs to defend itself. Once misidentification occurs, authority hardens. The secret book of John describes authority not as a natural extension of wisdom, but as a mechanism that compensates for ignorance. When power mistakes itself for origin, it must secure that mistake. Rule becomes necessary to preserve the framing that sustains it. Authority, in this account, is defensive. It does not emerge to guide. It emerges to stabilize. The Creator governs because governance prevents exposure. Law replaces understanding. Command replaces recognition. The system begins to rely on enforcement rather than alignment. This is why fear enters so early. Fear disciplines what authority cannot explain. It closes inquiry. It trains obedience. It ensures that comparison never arises. A ruler who fears comparison must eliminate it. So authority becomes singular. The secret book of John reframes the familiar Genesis commands as structural safeguards. Prohibition is not moral instruction, it is containment. Knowledge is restricted, not because it corrupts, but because it destabilizes hierarchy. He became arrogant, saying, "I am God, and there is no other beside me." This declaration is not revelation, it is insulation. By asserting exclusivity, authority prevents reference. Without reference, legitimacy cannot be questioned. Power becomes self-justifying. From this moment, obedience acquires moral weight. Submission is no longer compliance, it is righteousness. Fear is no longer reaction, it is reverence. Law is no longer management, it is divine order. This transformation is essential to the lie. Authority cannot survive as mere control. It must become sacred. The secret book of John insists that once authority is sanctified, it no longer appears as force. It appears as necessity. The system feels inevitable. Deviations feel wrong rather than curious. This is how authority embeds itself into consciousness. What makes this structure so stable is that it functions. The world operates, seasons turn, societies organize. Stability is mistaken for truth. Endurance is mistaken for legitimacy. But function does not equal origin. The Gnostic text draws this distinction sharply. A highest source does not threaten. It does not command obedience. It does not prohibit knowledge. Authority that relies on these tools reveals its insecurity. The lie embedded in creation, therefore, does not require constant violence. It requires repetition. Law repeated becomes habit. Habit repeated becomes belief. Belief repeated becomes reality. By the time authority is questioned, it already feels ancient, natural, unchallengeable. The misidentification has done its work. The ruler is no longer compared to source, he is the source. This is why later, systems fought so fiercely to preserve this framing. To question authority here is not just to challenge a ruler, it is to challenge the structure of reality itself. The secret book of John does not yet dismantle this structure. It prepares you to see it. And once seen, authority can no longer claim innocence. The lie survives because ignorance governs from the center. The secret book of John does not portray the Creator as malicious. It portrays him as unaware. His power is real. His authority is effective. But his perception is enclosed. He does not know what lies beyond his domain, and this limitation defines everything that follows. Ignorance here is not lack of intelligence. It is lack of reference. The Creator sees only what he rules. His world is complete from the inside. Nothing contradicts him. Nothing exceeds him. In such a closed horizon, power naturally mistakes itself for origin. This is why the declaration of sole divinity appears. I am God, and there is no other beside me. The text treats this statement as evidence, not proof. A being who truly knew the source would not need to assert exclusivity. Only a ruler enclosed within his own system would reach such a conclusion. Ignorance does not question itself. It enforces. The Creator does not investigate his own limits, because nothing within the system prompts investigation. Any challenge is interpreted as rebellion. Any comparison is treated as threat. This ignorance becomes structural. The world formed under such rule inherits the same enclosure. It is ordered, but closed. Stable, but unaware of what lies beyond its own framework. Law replaces insight. Fear replaces orientation. The cosmos mirrors its ruler. This is why the problem cannot be reduced to cruelty. Cruelty can be resisted. Ignorance armed with authority cannot. A blind ruler does not recognize correction. He responds to contradiction by strengthening control. Suppression feels justified because uncertainty feels dangerous. The secret book of John insists that ignorance is protected by obedience. The more the system is obeyed, the less pressure there is for awareness to emerge. Submission reinforces enclosure. Fear deepens blindness. This explains why the Creator restricts knowledge, not because knowledge corrupts, but because knowledge reveals. Awareness introduces comparison. Comparison fractures enclosure. Ignorance cannot survive exposure. The lie embedded in creation therefore rests on ignorance maintained through authority. The system does not need to deceive consciously. It only needs to prevent reference beyond itself. And it succeeds. A world governed by ignorance feels absolute from the inside. Laws feel final. Commands feel sacred. Alternatives feel unimaginable. This is the deepest effect of the lie. The secret book of John does not ask you to condemn the Creator. It asks you to understand him. He is not the source. He is a ruler who does not know that he is not. And once ignorance is recognized as limitation rather than truth, authority begins to lose its mystique, not through rebellion, through awareness. Ignorance does not rule by will alone, it builds systems. The secret book of John explains that once authority mistakes itself for source, it must externalize control. Rule becomes layered, power becomes procedural. Structures arise to stabilize a claim that cannot withstand awareness. This is how the lie becomes durable. Structure is not introduced as tyranny. It is introduced as necessity within enclosure. When alignment is absent, regulation replaces it. When origin is unknown, systems must manage behavior. Laws appear, hierarchies form, roles solidify. What once flowed now requires enforcement. This is not cruelty. It is compensation. The Creator does not need to monitor everything directly. Structure governs on His behalf. Authority disperses into mechanisms that repeat the same limitation everywhere. The system becomes self-sustaining. Ignorance no longer needs intent. This is why the world feels ordered rather than guided. Rules define movement. Boundaries define possibility. Consequences enforce conformity. Meaning circulates, but only within approved channels. Nothing points beyond the system. The secret book of John frames this as enclosure perfected. Once structure is normalized, authority no longer appears imposed. It feels inevitable, natural, ancient. People inherit it rather than question it. By the time awareness arises, the system already defines what awareness is allowed to perceive. This is how misidentification becomes permanent. Authority is no longer compared to source. It becomes reality itself. Structure teaches obedience without commands. Habit replaces enforcement. Participation sustains the lie more effectively than fear alone ever could. This is why the text focuses on architecture rather than personalities. A ruler can be challenged. A system reproduces itself. Once structure exists, ignorance no longer needs defense. The system enforces its own assumptions. Deviations feel wrong rather than curious. Alternatives feel dangerous without explanation. The Creator's rule endures not because it is true, but because it is embedded everywhere, in law, in language, in expectation. The lie becomes environmental. The secret book of John insists on this point. The deepest deception is not false belief. It is a structure that prevents belief from ever being examined. This is why dismantling authority is not the text's aim. Recognition is. Because once structure is seen as structure, it loses its claim to origin. It is revealed as management rather than meaning. The world does not collapse when this happens, but authority changes. It can no longer pretend to be what it is not. A structure built on misidentification cannot remain exposed. It must be covered. The secret book of John describes the veil not as a single deception, but as an accumulation, layers of explanation, layers of habit, layers of belief that slowly obscure the original distinction between source and ruler. The veil is not imposed all at once. It forms. As structure stabilizes authority, perception narrows. What cannot be governed is excluded. What cannot be explained by the system is dismissed. Over time, awareness adapts to what the structure permits. This adaptation becomes normal. The veil works through familiarity. Law becomes tradition. Tradition becomes identity. Identity becomes unquestionable. What began as management is mistaken for reality itself. The secret book of John insists that the veil does not rely on lies. It relies on coherence. Everything within the system makes sense according to its own logic. Commands align with consequences. Fear appears justified. Obedience feels meaningful. Nothing seems missing. Language is reshaped by the veil. Words harden. Meanings narrow. Certain questions feel inappropriate before they are even asked. Curiosity is allowed only where it does not threaten the frame that answers it. This is not censorship. It is conditioning. The veil is strongest where it feels natural, where alternatives no longer occur, where authority no longer needs to assert itself because it is assumed. This is the most effective form of concealment. The distinction between source and creator is buried not by argument, but by irrelevance. It becomes unthinkable rather than forbidden. The system does not need to silence comparison. It prevents comparison from arising. The secret book of John emphasizes that concealment does not erase truth. It covers it. The light is not destroyed. It is hidden beneath layers of explanation that redirect attention upward toward power rather than inward toward origin. Coverage replaces denial. Moments occur when the veil thins, when authority demands assent without understanding, when fear is invoked where meaning should suffice, when explanation feels excessive. These moments are unsettling. To sense the veil is not to escape the system. It is to realize that the system is managing perception, that obedience is being trained, that authority depends on continued misidentification. Once the veil is felt, it cannot fully recover its invisibility. The world still functions, but something shifts. What once appeared absolute now appears maintained. And what is maintained can be examined. The secret book of John does not lift the veil. It makes you aware that it exists, and awareness is enough to weaken what concealment depends on. Recognition does not arrive as revelation. It arrives as destabilization. The secret book of John does not describe awakening as sudden knowledge or spiritual ascent. It describes a fracture in certainty. Authority loses its gravity. Commands feel excessive. Fear no longer explains itself. Something loosens. Recognition begins when the framing collapses. The system still functions. Law still governs behavior. Structure still organizes life. But the claim to ultimacy weakens. Authority is no longer experienced as origin, only as management. This shift is internal. The recognized individual does not immediately reject the world. They remain within its structures. They follow rules where necessary. They participate in systems that continue to operate. But belief withdraws. This withdrawal is dangerous to power. A system built on misidentification depends on internal assent. It requires subjects to believe that command equals source. Once that belief erodes, authority persists only through repetition. and repetition is fragile. The secret book of John insists that recognition is irreversible. Once source and ruler are distinguished, they cannot be collapsed again. Obedience no longer feels aligned. Submission no longer feels virtuous. Fear loses its sacred justification. This does not produce rebellion. It produces distance. The recognized individual begins to notice patterns. How often law replaces understanding. How frequently fear substitutes for meaning. How authority reacts defensively to comparison. These observations are quiet, but corrosive. Recognition does not heal the fracture embedded in creation. It does not restore harmony or dissolve structure. The world remains governed. Authority remains active. The system does not collapse outwardly. What collapses is certainty. The text offers no resolution here, no escape, no reconciliation, no replacement authority. This absence is deliberate. To recognize the lie embedded in creation is to live without final assurances, without a voice that closes inquiry, without a structure that claims ultimate legitimacy. The world continues, but it no longer convinces. Recognition does not destroy authority. It reveals its limits. And once limits are seen, obedience can no longer pretend to be alignment with what is highest. The secret book of John does not end with correction. It ends with clarity. The world remains structured. Authority continues to govern. Law still organizes behavior. Nothing collapses outwardly. The system endures exactly as it did before. What changes is recognition. To see the lie embedded in creation is not to escape the world. It is to stop mistaking rule for origin. To stop granting fear the status of truth. To stop confusing obedience with alignment. The text offers no new authority to replace the old one. That absence is intentional. A false framing cannot be healed by installing a different ruler. It dissolves only when misidentification ends, when power is no longer mistaken for source, and command is no longer treated as ultimate. This is not rebellion, it is disentanglement. The secret book of John leaves you between what governs and what precedes governance, between a system that functions and a source that does not command, between authority that enforces and light that does not demand submission. Nothing tells you what to do next, because the highest source does not issue orders. It does not threaten. It does not require belief. It simply is. If this realization unsettles you, let it. Do not rush to restore certainty. Do not replace one structure with another. Attend instead to where fear asks to be obeyed, and where authority claims a legitimacy it cannot possess. The light was never lost. It was misidentified. And once misidentification ends, obedience can no longer disguise itself as truth.